From the very first moment she met Daniel, Grace thought she had stumbled upon the answer to her prayers. His smile was warm, his words were gentle, and his attention made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt for years. At first glance, Daniel seemed like the kind of man every Christian woman would want: polite, hardworking, and always quick to compliment her faith. But behind that charming exterior was a truth Grace would only discover much later. Daniel had never truly sought God about her. He had never prayed before asking for her hand, and that one omission would change the course of both their lives. It started in the most ordinary of ways. Grace met Daniel at a friend's church program, a revival meeting that was supposed to run for 3 days. She was part of the ushering team, busy directing people to their seats, when Daniel arrived with 2 of his friends. He was tall, well-dressed, and had the kind of quiet confidence that drew attention without effort. After the service, he approached her, thanked her for helping him find a seat, and introduced himself. There was nothing overly dramatic about their first interaction, but Grace remembered the way his eyes lingered just a little too long, as though he had made up his mind about her already. Daniel wasted no time in pursuing her. The very next day, he asked for her number, claiming he wanted to know more about her walk with God. That line, though now it sounded rehearsed in her memory, was exactly the kind of thing that would win Grace over in those days. She was in her late 20s, serious about her faith, and eager to marry a man who loved the Lord. She thought his interest in her spiritual life was a sign of deep character. Their conversations were light at first, sharing favorite Bible verses, talking about church, laughing about childhood stories. But as days turned into weeks, Daniel's questions became more personal. He wanted to know about her family, her past relationships, her dreams. He spoke with a kind of certainty about their future that made her feel secure. Grace began to picture a life with him, waking up together for morning prayers, raising children in the faith, serving in ministry side by side. What Grace didn't know, and what Daniel never mentioned, was that he had already made up his mind to marry her before he knew her at all. It wasn't because of divine leading, or because he had prayed and received peace from God. It was because she looked like the kind of wife he wanted. She was beautiful, respectful, and involved in church, a safe choice, in his mind. But his decision was built entirely on what he saw, not on God's guidance. 3 months into knowing each other, Daniel proposed. It wasn't grand or elaborate, just a quiet dinner at a small restaurant, where he nervously pulled out a small velvet box. Grace's heart pounded as he spoke. "Grace, you are everything I've been looking for. I believe we're meant to build a future together. Will you marry me?" She hesitated for just a second, thinking it was all happening very fast. But her friends had told her, "When a good man comes along, don't waste time." And Daniel seemed good. So she said yes. At first, everything was blissful. They began wedding preparations, attended counseling at her church, and their families met. But it wasn't long before small cracks began to appear. Daniel grew impatient whenever Grace wanted to pray about major wedding decisions. He often brushed her off, saying, "Babe, not everything needs prayer. Sometimes you just have to decide and move on." She laughed it off at first, but something about those words unsettled her. Then, during counseling sessions, the pastor would ask them about shared values and spiritual goals. Grace noticed Daniel would give vague answers, often changing the subject to their honeymoon plans or business ideas. She began to wonder if his faith was as deep as she had assumed. One night, unable to shake the unease, Grace decided to fast and pray for clarity. She asked God to confirm if this marriage was truly His will. The next morning, she woke up with a heavy heart and a deep, inexplicable lack of peace. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just wedding stress. But the feeling grew stronger over the next weeks. One day, she finally asked Daniel directly, "Before you proposed to me, did you pray and ask God if I was His choice for you?" He looked at her as though the question was unnecessary. "Grace, I didn't need to. I knew you were perfect for me from the moment I saw you. Why would I waste time asking for what I already wanted?" That answer broke something inside her. It wasn't just about the proposal. It was about the fact that the man she was about to marry didn't think it was necessary to seek God before making a life-altering decision. She realized marriage wasn't just about two people loving each other. It was about walking in alignment with God's purpose. And if Daniel could ignore God's leading on this, what else would he decide without prayer? The weeks leading up to the wedding became a battle in her spirit. She wanted to believe love was enough. She wanted to believe Daniel could change. But the more she prayed, the more the peace of God stayed far from her. Her pastor noticed her heaviness and called her aside. "Grace," he said gently, "sometimes God allows us to see red flags before marriage, not to scare us, but to protect us. If you don't have peace now, it will not suddenly appear after you say I do." It took courage Grace didn't know she had, but she called off the wedding. The backlash was fierce. Friends called her unwise, family members accused her of being too picky, and Daniel begged her to reconsider. But she stood firm. "I'd rather endure temporary pain than spend a lifetime regretting a decision I made without God's blessing," she told herself. Years later, Grace would look back and thank God for that difficult choice. She learned that marriage without prayer is like building a house without a foundation. It may look fine for a while, but when the storms come, it will collapse. She also learned that not every good person is God's person for you. To anyone listening, Grace's story is a reminder. Never say yes to a proposal until you've first said yes to God about that person. Physical attraction, emotional connection, and shared goals can be wonderful, but they are not substitutes for divine confirmation. Marriage is too sacred, too permanent, and too costly to enter without the covering of prayer. If Grace's story has opened your eyes, remember this: a decision made without prayer is a risk you can't afford to take. Before you commit to anyone, ask God, wait for His peace, and be willing to walk away if He says no. Don't let emotions, pressure, or fear make you rush ahead of His timing. If you were touched by this story, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe to Relationship Wisdom for more faith-based stories that help you love smarter. And in the comments, share your own experience. Have you ever made a relationship decision without praying first? What happened? Your story could be the warning that saves someone else.